The front door of Harrington House slammed so hard that the crystal chandelier trembled above the marble hall. Victor Harrington did not notice the sound echoing through the mansion. He had brought the storm inside with him. His black coat was wet from the cold rain, his jaw was tight, and his hand still held the phone from the call that had ruined his afternoon. The headmistress at St. Aurelia Academy had spoken with careful words, the kind people used when they feared a rich man more than they respected a father. She had said that Emma had not spoken all day. She had said Noah had locked himself in the restroom with stomach pain again. She had said, with a pause that felt like an accusation, that the children seemed calmer whenever the housekeeper picked them up. That single sentence had followed Victor through traffic like a knife pressed under his ribs. He was Victor Harrington, owner of hotels, towers, private resorts, and half the skyline beyond the river. He paid the finest doctors. He paid the finest tutors. He paid for art lessons, riding lessons, piano lessons, and a room full of toys that remained untouched. He did not pay a housekeeper to become important. He did not pay anyone to fill the empty place his dead wife had left behind. By the time his driver stopped at the mansion, Victor was ready to put the house back in order by force if necessary. He crossed the hall without removing his shoes. The staff disappeared before he reached them. Everyone in that house knew the sound of his silence. It was worse than shouting. He moved past the formal dining room, past the portraits of ancestors who had never smiled, and toward the old service corridor, where light flickered under a door that should have been locked. Then he heard laughter. Not polite laughter. Not the thin, nervous laugh Emma sometimes gave adults who asked too many questions. Real laughter. Small, breathless, messy laughter that seemed impossible in that frozen house. Victor stopped. For 1 second, he almost did not open the door, because the sound did something cruel to him. It reminded him of Isabel. His wife had laughed like that before the accident, before the rain, before a police officer stood on his doorstep and said words that split his life in half. Then he remembered the call from the school, and anger returned like armor. He pushed the door open. The laundry room was in chaos. Warm towels lay in a mountain on the floor. A bowl of flour sat beside a tray of broken cookies. Paper lanterns hung from a clothesline, each one painted with crooked stars. At the center of the room, Clara Bell, the housekeeper he had hired 6 months ago, knelt on the tiles with flour on her cheek and a wooden spoon in her hand. Across from her sat Emma, 8 years old, with paint on her fingers and a smile Victor had not seen in nearly 2 years. Beside Emma, little Noah was laughing so hard that he had to hold his stomach, but not in pain. No one moved at first. The children froze with guilty faces. Clara slowly lowered the spoon. She was 34, quiet, plain, in the way people became plain when they had learned not to ask life for too much. Her gray uniform was clean in the mornings and tired by evening. Her brown hair was pinned at the back of her neck. She had the calm eyes of someone who had already survived losing something precious. Victor had never bothered to ask what. "What is this?" he said. His voice was low, but it filled the room. Noah stopped laughing. Emma pulled her painted hands into her lap. Clara stood, not quickly, not defensively, simply with care, as if sudden movement might frighten the children. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "I am sorry. The children had a difficult afternoon. We were baking the cookies their mother used to make. We were only going to clean up before dinner." "Their mother used to make," Victor repeated. The words burned. "Who gave you permission to bring her into this room?" Emma looked at him then, and something strange happened. Her lips parted. For months she had answered him with nods, shrugs, and the smallest possible whispers. Now she said, "Daddy, please do not be mad." Clara was helping us remember without hurting. The room went completely still. Victor heard the rain ticking against the narrow window. He heard his own breathing. His daughter had spoken a full sentence, and the first thing she used it for was to defend the woman he was about to punish. That should have softened him. Instead, it frightened him. Fear in Victor always dressed itself as control. "Go upstairs," he said. Noah reached for Clara's hand. Victor saw it and felt something ugly twist in his chest. "I said upstairs." The children obeyed. Emma looked back once. Clara did not move until they were gone. Then Victor stepped closer. "You are here to clean my house. You are not here to play mother to my children." Clara lowered her eyes, but her voice did not shake. "I was not trying to replace anyone. You crossed a line. They were crying when they came home. That is not your concern." For the first time, Clara looked directly at him. "It became my concern when no one else heard them." The sentence struck him harder than a slap. Victor turned away because he was suddenly afraid of what his face might show. "You are dismissed," he said. "Pack your things tonight. My lawyer will arrange severance." Clara went pale, but she only nodded. Before she could leave, Victor reached for the folder he had carried from the car. Inside was the deed to the Old Sparrow Inn, a burned property on the edge of town, useless since the fire after Isabel's funeral. He had meant to demolish it. Now, in a cold act of pride, he placed the papers on the table. Take that ruin if you want a place to play savior. It is worth nothing to me. Clara stared at the deed, then at him. It is not nothing, she whispered. To me it is, Victor said. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, because here we share stories that remind us that kindness can still change lives. And tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this story today? Because what Victor Harrington did not know was that he had not given Clara a ruin. He had given her the one broken place that still held his wife's final dream, and what she built there would one day bring his children back to life, make an entire town weep, and force the richest man in the city to kneel in the ashes of everything he thought money could replace. The next morning, Harrington House looked perfect again. The towels were folded, the flour had vanished, the paper lanterns were gone from the laundry room, as if the small rebellion of warmth had never happened. Breakfast waited beneath silver covers in the dining room. The long table reflected the pale light from the windows, polished so well that Victor could see his own face in the wood. He hated what he saw there, but he looked anyway. Emma sat at one side, Noah at the other. Between them there was enough space for a whole life to disappear. Neither child touched the food. Emma kept her hands beneath the table, probably hiding the last traces of paint Victor had ordered a maid to wash away. Noah stared at the chair where Isabel used to sit on Sundays, her hair loose, her robe tied poorly, her voice full of gentle music as she scolded Victor for taking calls before pancakes. The chair had been empty for 2 years, but Victor still refused to have it removed. Absence, he had learned, could become furniture. Clara entered with a small suitcase at her side. She had changed out of the gray uniform and into a plain blue dress. It made her look less like staff and more like a person. Victor disliked that too. She placed a ring of keys on the sideboard. I will leave after I say goodbye to the children, she said. There will be no need, Victor answered without looking up. Emma's fork slipped from her hand and struck the plate. The sound made everyone flinch. Noah pushed back his chair. No, he said, small but clear. Victor stared at him. Noah almost never defied him. Clara looked at the boy with a warning kindness, the kind that said courage should not get a child punished. But Noah was already crying. She did not do anything wrong. Victor felt the servants listening from the hall. He hated being witnessed inside his own failure. Noah, sit down. No. His son shook his head. My stomach hurts when she is not here. That is enough. It hurts, because the house gets cold. The sentence was childish and impossible, yet it found the deepest part of Victor impressed there. The house did get cold, not in temperature. The heating system was excellent. But after Isabel died, Victor had removed every unpredictable thing from their lives. No loud music, no baking after bedtime, no garden picnics in the rain, no cushions on the floor, no singing in hallways. He called it stability. His children had learned to call it cold. Clara crossed the room and knelt several feet from Noah, careful not to reach for him without permission. Listen to your father, she said softly. He loves you, even when he forgets how to show it. Victor almost told her to stop. He did not, because Emma was looking at him with an expression he could not bear. It was not hatred. Hatred would have been easier. It was disappointment, old and tired in a child's face. Clara said goodbye from where she knelt. She did not hug them. She only held out both hands, palms up. Emma placed her painted fingers in one hand. Noah placed his trembling hand in the other. Clara whispered something Victor could not hear. Then she stood, took the deed from the table, and walked out of the mansion with the suitcase rolling behind her like a quiet verdict. For 3 days, Victor tried to restore order. He replaced Clara with 2 new maids and a certified childcare specialist who arrived with folders, schedules, and a smile so clean it seemed manufactured. He called the pediatrician about Noah's stomach. He called Emma's speech therapist and demanded more frequent sessions. He emailed the headmistress and asked for written reports twice a week. He doubled the children's activity schedule because a busy child, he believed, had less time to grieve. By the 4th day, Emma had stopped speaking again. By the 5th, Noah woke at 3 in the morning curled on the bathroom floor, sobbing that there was a stone inside his belly. Victor carried him to bed, called the doctor, and stood uselessly while the boy clutched the blanket. The doctor found no fever, no infection, no clear physical cause. Children can carry emotions in their bodies, the doctor said carefully. Victor thanked him and ended the call before anger betrayed him. Later that night, he stood outside Emma's room and heard her whispering. For one reckless second, he thought she was talking to him, but the door was open just enough for him to see her on the floor beside Noah, holding a paper lantern she must have hidden under her pillow. She said, "Clara said lights do not make the dark disappear. They just remind us we are not alone inside it." Noah asked, "Is she gone forever?" Emma did not answer. She pressed the lantern to her chest. Victor backed away as if he had walked into a room where he had no right to be. He returned to his office, poured whiskey, and did not drink it. The untouched glass sat beside a framed photograph of Isabel at the Sparrow Inn, taken years before the fire. She stood under its wooden sign with both arms open, laughing at something outside the frame. Victor had avoided that photograph for months. Now his eyes went to it against his will. The Sparrow Inn had been Isabel's inheritance, though inheritance was too grand a word for a small riverside building with 12 rooms, a crooked porch, and a kitchen that smelled of cinnamon. Her grandmother had opened it for travelers who could not afford the grand hotels that men like Victor owned. Isabel had loved it more than all his resorts. She used to say every town needed one place where lonely people could enter without feeling poor. Victor had promised to help restore it. He had promised many things before work became louder than love. After Isabel died, a storm struck the old inn. Bad wiring sparked in the attic. By morning, the roof had collapsed, and the windows were black holes. Victor stood in the rain watching smoke curl from the place his wife had cherished. Reporters came, because reporters came wherever his name could be printed. He told them the structure would be evaluated. Then he locked the gate and never returned. When he gave Clara the deed, he had meant to rid himself of a memory. He had also meant to wound her. The cruelty of that truth sat with him now, unwelcome and precise. He told himself she would sell the land to a developer for whatever small price it could bring. He told himself it was more generous than she deserved. Yet by morning, curiosity had become irritation, and irritation had become a command. He asked his assistant to find out what Clara Bell had done with the property. The report came 2 days later. She had not sold it. She had filed paperwork to reopen it as a community kitchen and lodging house, pending inspection. Victor read the message twice, then laughed once without humor. "Impossible," he said to the empty office. The Sparrow Inn was charred timber, ruined floors, broken glass, and unpaid taxes he had cleared only because the deed transfer required it. No bank would lend to Clara. No contractor would work for her without payment. No one would invest in a woman who arrived with one suitcase and an old key. But Victor did not understand what people offered when money was absent and gratitude remained. Clara's sister brought blankets from her church. A retired carpenter named Thomas Vale repaired the porch rail because Clara had once sat with his dying wife at the hospital when no family could come. The baker donated day-old bread. A school bus driver brought paint left from the depot. Teenagers looking for volunteer hours cleared the garden and found, beneath weeds and ash, the stone path Isabel had laid by hand. Clara worked beside them from dawn until night. She slept in the least damaged room under a quilt that smelled of smoke no matter how often she aired it. Her son Eli came after school, a thin 7-year-old with solemn eyes and a green scarf he wore even when it was warm. Eli had known grief too. His father had died in a warehouse accident, and for nearly a year afterward the boy had stopped speaking to anyone except Clara. She had learned then what Victor refused to learn now, that silence was not emptiness. Sometimes silence was a locked door, and love had to sit outside it patiently. On the first Saturday, Clara placed a table in the inn's burned dining room. The walls were still blackened above the windows. The ceiling was covered with temporary boards. Rain leaked into 2 buckets by the hearth. Yet she spread a clean cloth over the table and set out soup, bread, and apples. A cardboard sign by the gate read, "If you are hungry, tired, or lonely, come in. No payment required." Only 3 people came that day: Thomas, a widow named Mrs. Alvarez, and a boy from the academy who pretended he was not crying. Clara served them as if the room were a palace. She did not ask for stories. She let the soup do the asking. By dusk, Mrs. Alvarez had told them about her husband's last joke. Thomas had admitted that he still set 2 cups on the table every morning. The boy had said nothing, but he ate 3 bowls and left with bread wrapped in a napkin. The next Saturday, 9 people came. The Saturday after that, 20. Someone brought a guitar. Someone fixed the broken front step. Someone painted the first paper lantern and hung it in the window. The lantern was red, crooked, and beautiful. Clara wrote beneath it, "For those who need a light but cannot ask for one." Victor heard pieces of this from other mouths. His assistant mentioned it with cautious admiration. The headmistress called to say students were asking permission to volunteer at the old inn. A board member joked that the fired housekeeper had better press than Harrington Hotels. Victor dismissed them all, but each mention opened a door he wanted closed. At home, the children grew quieter. Emma watched the driveway every evening. as though expecting Clara to return if she wished hard enough. Noah's stomach pains came and went like storms. Sometimes he seemed normal. Then a certain smell, song, or empty hallway folded him in half. The child care specialist recommended calming exercises. The speech therapist recommended patience. Victor recommended everyone remember he was paying them to solve a problem. One evening, while searching for an insurance document, Victor found an envelope in Isabel's old writing desk. It was sealed with a small blue sticker shaped like a sparrow. His name was on the front in her handwriting. He held it for a long time, then put it back unopened. Grief had made him cowardly, in ways no rival could see. He could buy towers, intimidate bankers, and speak before thousands, but he could not open a letter from the woman whose absence still governed every room. That night, Emma came to his office. She stood at the threshold in her nightgown, hair tangled, lantern in one hand. Victor looked up from a contract he had not been reading. "What is it? Can we visit the inn?" she asked. "No. You did not even think." "I do not need to think. That place is unsafe. Clara is making it safe." "Clara is not your mother." Emma's face changed. The hurt was immediate, but beneath it was something fierce. "I know that," she whispered. "I remember my mother. You are the one who acts like remembering her is a crime." Victor stood too fast. Emma stepped back. Regret reached him a second late, as it always did. He wanted to apologize, but the word had become unfamiliar in his mouth. Emma turned and left before he could recover it. The paper lantern bumped softly against her leg, a small light moving down the dark hall. The next morning, Victor drove himself to the Sparrow Inn. He told no one. He took the back road along the river, the one Isabel used to love because wildflowers grew by the fence in spring. It was late autumn now. The trees were bare, the sky low, the ground silver with frost. When the inn appeared through the branches, Victor felt the old pain rise sharp and hot. It looked worse than he remembered and better than it should have. The roof was patched with mismatched shingles. The porch leaned but no longer sagged. Smoke stains still darkened the upper floor, yet the windows had been scrubbed, and paper lanterns glowed behind several panes. People were there, too many people. A woman carried a basket inside. 2 teenagers stacked firewood. Thomas Vale was on a ladder fixing the sign. Clara stood in the yard holding a clipboard and laughing at something Eli said. Victor almost drove away. Pride kept him where he was. He parked by the gate and stepped out. Conversations thinned when people recognized him. No one bowed. No one hurried to please him. That alone made him feel strangely exposed. Clara saw him and came forward. She wore work boots, a faded sweater, and a smear of white paint near her temple. There was ash on her sleeve. For some reason, the sight made Victor remember the flower on her cheek in the laundry room. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "you are accepting volunteers on a condemned property," he said. "It is not condemned. The inspector cleared the ground floor for limited use yesterday." With whose money? She looked past him at the inn. "With many people's kindness. Kindness does not repair structural damage." "No," she said, "but it gets people to show up with hammers." He disliked how calmly she answered him. He disliked the people watching. Most of all, he disliked the warmth coming from the open doorway, the smell of soup, the low murmur of voices, the sense that something alive had returned to a place he had declared dead. "This property is still tied to my family's name," he said. "You transferred the deed. I can contest that." "You can," Clara said. "But before you do, come inside and see what you would be closing." Victor should have refused. Instead, he followed her across the repaired step. The dining room stopped him. The blackened beams remained visible, but someone had sanded and sealed them, turning scars into dark lines of history. The floor was patched with boards of different colors. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, each painted with a name, a star, a flower, a sentence. Along one wall was a shelf of donated books. Along another, a row of mugs that did not match. In the center stood the long table with soup bowls steaming. There were people he recognized and people he did not. A widow from one of his hotels, a delivery man, 2 academy students, an old veteran with shaking hands. They looked up at him, then returned to their food. In his own lobby, Victor's arrival changed the temperature of a room. Here, his importance dissolved in the smell of bread. Clara pointed to a smaller room beside the kitchen. "That is the listening room." Inside, children sat on cushions around a low table, painting lanterns. Eli helped a little girl choose blue paint. On the wall were words written in careful letters. "You may be quiet here. You may be sad here. You may laugh here. You do not have to earn your place here." Victor read the words once, then again. Something in his throat tightened. "Who wrote that?" he asked. "Clara did." "No, Eli said from the table. Mama wrote it because she needed it too. Clara looked at her son with surprise and tenderness. Victor looked away. There were kinds of love he had forgotten existed. Not grand sacrifices, not expensive protection, but the permission to be weak in front of someone and remain wanted. A small girl held up her lantern. "Miss Clara, is this ugly?" Clara crouched beside her. "It looks like you were brave enough to begin." Victor left without another threat. He drove home slower than he had come. The river moved beside him, gray and patient. For the first time since giving away the deed, he wondered if the Sparrow Inn had not been worthless at all. Perhaps it had only been waiting for someone poor enough, wounded enough, and brave enough to touch what he could not. That evening, Noah's pain returned. He refused dinner, curled on the window seat, and watched rain slide down the glass. Victor sat beside him, awkwardly close. He wanted to ask what hurt, but he feared the answer. After several minutes, Noah spoke without turning. "Daddy, when people die, do they know if we stop saying their names?" Victor's hand tightened on his knee. "I do not know. Clara says names are like candles." Victor closed his eyes. Of course, Clara had an answer. "What does that mean?" "It means saying them does not bring them back, but it helps us see where love still is." The room blurred for a second. Victor tried to remember the last time he had said Isabel's name in front of his children. He had spoken of your mother, her things, the accident, the arrangements. But her name, the actual shape of her life, had become too dangerous. He had hidden it, and in doing so he had taught his children to hide their grief from it. "Isabel," he said quietly. Noah turned. Victor said it again. "Your mother, Isabel, loved pancakes with too much syrup. She sang badly when she was happy. She could never keep a plant alive except rosemary, which made her very proud. She loved that old inn more than any hotel I ever built." Noah's eyes filled. "Mine too," he whispered, though he barely remembered it. Victor opened his arm, uncertain whether the boy would come. Noah came. He fit against Victor's side as if there had always been a place there, waiting under the expensive fabric and old fear. Across the hall, Emma listened with her back against the wall. She did not enter. She did not need to. For the first time in months, her father had let the dead be alive in the house again. The change did not last smoothly. Healing rarely obeys the schedule of men who are used to meetings beginning on time. Some mornings Victor woke determined to be different and failed before breakfast. He still answered calls at the table. He still spoke too sharply when the children resisted a lesson. He still stood in doorways like a guard instead of entering rooms like a father. But now he noticed the failure. That was new. Shame no longer turned immediately into anger. Sometimes it became apology, clumsy but real. "I should not have said that," he told Emma one afternoon after criticizing the paint on her school project. She stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. Then she nodded once and kept painting. The apology did not fix everything. It simply laid one board across a gap. Meanwhile, the Sparrow Inn grew. Clara changed the name on a temporary wooden board to the Sparrow House, because inn sounded like business and house sounded like welcome. Every Thursday evening, she opened the kitchen for anyone who needed a meal. Every Saturday, children painted lanterns in the listening room. On Sundays, people brought stories of those they missed. They did not call it therapy, they called it supper. A local reporter wrote about it after finding 3 academy students washing dishes there. The headline read, "Fired Maid Rebuilds Burned Inn into Haven for the Grieving." Victor saw it on his assistant's tablet during a board meeting. Beneath the headline was a photograph of Clara standing on the porch with Eli, Thomas, Mrs. Alvarez, and a dozen lanterns behind them. She was not smiling for attention. She was smiling at someone out of frame. Victor enlarged the image before he realized everyone at the table was watching. "Excellent community optics," one board member said. "We could sponsor it. Put the Harrington name back on the property." Victor looked at him for a long moment. "No, no, as in no sponsorship. No, as in do not touch it." The room fell silent. Victor returned the tablet and tried to resume the agenda. Yet the article traveled farther than he expected. Donations appeared at the Sparrow House. Canned food, children's books, a second-hand piano, a crate of mismatched plates from a restaurant closing downtown. Clara wrote thank you notes for each gift. She refused 3 offers from developers. She refused one offer from a charity that wanted to rebrand the place in exchange for funding. "We are not building a monument to donors," she told Thomas. "We are building a table." Victor heard that sentence from his assistant and carried it all day. That night, he opened Isabel's desk again. The sealed letter waited where he had left it, patient as grief. He touched the Sparrow sticker. The house was quiet. Emma and Noah were asleep. Rain pressed against the windows. the same sound that had followed the police officer's words 2 years earlier. Victor sat down, broke the seal, and unfolded the paper. "My dearest Victor," it began, "if you are reading this, then I was either braver than usual and gave it to you, or life has done what life does and forced you to listen after I am gone." He stopped. His hands shook. For several minutes he could not continue. Then he forced himself to read. "I know you love us through work. I know every tower you build feels to you like a wall against danger. But love is not only protection. Sometimes love is sitting on the kitchen floor when the cookies burn. Sometimes it is letting children see you cry so they know tears do not make them alone. If anything ever happens to me, do not turn the house into a museum of silence. Say my name. Tell them foolish stories. Take them to the Sparrow Inn. Restore it if you can. Not as a hotel. As a place where people who have lost something can come and be held by ordinary kindness. Promise me you will not let grief make you rich and empty." Victor read the last line again and again until the ink blurred. Rich and empty. He made no sound at first. Then a noise came out of him that did not resemble the controlled grief he had allowed at the funeral. It was broken, animal, and ashamed. He pressed the letter to his face. All the rooms he had kept spotless, all the schedules he had enforced, all the money he had spent on not feeling, collapsed inside him. Emma found him there near midnight. He did not hear the door open. She stepped into the office and saw her father bent over the desk, crying with Isabel's letter in his hands. For a moment she looked frightened. Then she came to him. Victor tried to straighten, to wipe his face, to become the father who did not break. Emma stopped him by placing one small hand on his shoulder. "It is okay, Daddy," she whispered. "Clara says crying is how love remembers its way out." Victor laughed through tears, because even now Clara had reached the room before him. He pulled Emma into his arms. "I am sorry," he said. "I am sorry I made this house so quiet. I am sorry I was afraid of her name. I am sorry I sent Clara away because she knew how to help you." Emma's arms tightened around his neck. "Are we allowed to miss Mama together now?" The question almost destroyed him. "Yes," Victor said. "We are allowed." The next morning he told the children about the letter. Not all of it, because some words belonged to him, but enough. He said Isabel had wanted the Sparrow Inn restored as a place for grieving people. Emma's eyes widened. Noah asked if Clara knew. Victor said no. Then both children asked to go. This time he did not say no. They drove to the Sparrow House after school. Victor sat in the back seat between them at Noah's request, an arrangement that would have seemed absurd to him a month earlier. The children carried a box of Isabel's old recipe cards and 3 rosemary plants from the conservatory, all half dead but stubbornly fragrant. Emma held the letter in a protective folder. Victor had agreed to show Clara only the part about the inn. He was learning that love did not mean surrendering every private sorrow to public light. Clara was outside hanging lanterns when they arrived. She froze when she saw the car. Victor stepped out first. For a moment they faced each other across the yard, both remembering the day he had given her the deed like an insult. Then Emma ran past him and into Clara's arms. Noah followed. Clara knelt in the frost and held them both, eyes closed, as if she had been waiting without allowing herself to hope. Victor looked away to give them privacy, and that was when he saw the new sign near the porch, the Sparrow House. Beneath it, in smaller letters, "For anyone who needs a place to stay until morning comes." When Clara stood, Victor handed her the copy of Isabel's letter. She read the passage slowly. Her face changed with each line. By the end, tears had gathered in her eyes. "I did not know," she said. "Neither did I," Victor answered. "She wanted this," Emma said. Clara looked at the child. "Maybe she planted the dream, and we were all late finding it." Victor felt the truth of that. He took a breath. "I owe you an apology." Clara shook her head gently. "You owe your children more than me. I know, but I owe you one too. I treated your kindness as a threat. I gave you this place because I wanted to throw away pain. You turned it into shelter. I am sorry." The yard had gone quiet. Volunteers pretended not to listen and failed. Clara accepted the apology with a nod, not with triumph. That humbled him more than anger would have. Then she said, "We could use help carrying the rosemary inside." Victor almost smiled. "Yes," he said, "I can carry rosemary." Inside, Emma placed Isabel's recipe cards in the kitchen. Noah helped Eli water the plants. Victor stood in the dining room while Clara pinned a new lantern near the hearth. This one was white, painted with a small sparrow and the name Isabel. Emma had made it the night before. When the lantern caught the light, the room seemed to inhale. For several weeks, Victor visited the Sparrow House without announcing himself. At first, he came with the children. Then he came alone after work, still in his suit, looking out of place among soup pots and paint jars. Clara never made him feel important there, and slowly he became grateful for that. She gave him ordinary tasks. Chop carrots, stack chairs, sweep the porch, read to the little ones if they ask. The first time she handed him a broom, Thomas nearly dropped a bucket laughing. Victor did not know how to be ordinary. He learned badly, then better. He chopped carrots unevenly. He stacked chairs in the wrong room. He read picture books with the stiff voice of a man delivering financial results. The children corrected him without fear. "Do the dragon voice," one boy demanded. Victor tried. Everyone laughed. He almost stopped, offended by instinct, then saw Emma covering her mouth, eyes bright. He did the dragon voice again, worse and louder. The sound of his daughter's laughter moved through him like sunlight entering a closed room. Not everyone approved. A gossip columnist suggested Victor was using the Sparrow House to repair his public image. A rival hotelier accused him of hiding charitable donations for tax benefits. One board member warned that spending time at a soup kitchen could weaken his authority. Victor listened, then ended the meeting early because Noah had invited him to Lantern Night. His priorities did not transform overnight into sainthood. He still cared about business. He still enjoyed winning. But winning no longer looked like standing alone above everyone else. Sometimes it looked like arriving before the soup cooled. Sometimes it looked like missing a call because Emma was explaining why blue paint sounded sadder than yellow. Sometimes it looked like letting people misunderstand him without correcting them, because the people who mattered were sitting at the table. Clara watched this change with caution. She had seen powerful men become gentle when ashamed and cruel again when pride recovered. She did not mistake one apology for a healed character. She kept boundaries. She refused his offer to hire a full construction crew until the community decided what it wanted. She refused a salary that would make her his employee again. "If I stay," she told him, "it must be because the work is right, not because I belong to your house." "You never belonged to my house," Victor said quietly. "I was the one who forgot that." Clara looked at him then with something like respect, though not yet trust. Trust, she knew, was not spoken into existence. It was built in repeated gestures, like floorboards across ash. Winter deepened. Snow came early, softening the burned edges of the inn and making the lanterns glow brighter against the dark. More people arrived each week. A mother whose son had died overseas. A teenager whose parents had divorced and stopped looking directly at him. A retired nurse who had held too many hands at the end and had no one to hold hers. They came for soup, but stayed, because no one hurried their grief. On the first night of December, a storm struck the town. Wind slammed against the Sparrow House. Rain turned to sleet. The repaired roof held over the dining room but leaked badly above the storage wing. Clara was helping Mrs. Alvarez move blankets when a sharp crack sounded from the back hall. Everyone froze. Then Eli shouted from the listening room. Victor was there that night, reading by the hearth with Noah on his lap. He stood so fast the book fell. Clara ran first. In the back hall, part of the old ceiling had buckled under trapped water. Dust filled the air. Eli stood coughing near the doorway, one hand bleeding from broken plaster. Behind him, a little girl cried because her lantern box was trapped under a fallen beam. "Get everyone out," Clara said. Victor heard the old fear roar to life. Fire, rain, collapse, loss. His body wanted to freeze as it had frozen the night Isabel died, when decisions came too late and the world punished him anyway. Then Noah's hand slipped into his. "Daddy." That one word brought him back. Victor lifted Noah and carried him to Thomas, then turned into the damaged hall. Clara was already trying to pull Eli away. The boy resisted, crying that the lanterns would be crushed. Clara told him lanterns could be remade. Eli shouted, "Not those. Those are their names." Victor understood. The box held lanterns painted for people who would never come back. To a child, they were not paper. They were proof that love had been seen. He grabbed the fallen beam. It was not large enough to kill, but heavy enough to pin the storage door. Thomas joined him. Together they shifted it inch by inch while sleet struck the broken roof and water ran down Victor's sleeves. Clara pulled the box free. The cardboard had torn, but most lanterns were dry. Eli clutched them to his chest and sobbed with relief. Then the lights went out. For one terrible moment the Sparrow House was black. Children cried in the dining room. Wind howled through the damaged roof. Victor felt Noah searching for him in the dark, though the boy was safely near the hearth. Old panic rose again, cold and complete. He could not see. He could not control. He could not buy light. Then Clara began to sing. Her voice was not polished. It trembled at first. The song was simple, a lullaby about a sparrow finding its way through rain. Eli joined her. Then Mrs. Alvarez. Then Emma, softly from near the door. One by one, Phones and candles and surviving paper lanterns began to glow. The darkness did not disappear all at once. It retreated in small circles of human light. Victor stood soaked in the hall, holding one side of the lantern box. He looked at Clara, at his children, at the strangers holding candles for one another, and something inside him finally surrendered, not to defeat, to belonging. He had spent years building places where wealthy people could sleep in luxury. Clara had built, from his discarded ruin, a place where wounded people could wake up. After the storm, the Sparrow House had to close for repairs. Clara tried to be calm when the inspector explained the damage, but Victor saw her hands shaking. The roof above the back wing needed major work. The electrical system had to be replaced. The building could not reopen until safety standards were met. Volunteers stood in the yard, wet and silent. The lanterns had been saved, but the house itself seemed to have reached the limit of kindness without money. Victor waited until the inspector left. Then he said, "I will pay for the repairs." Clara immediately shook her head. No, he expected resistance, but the speed of it surprised him. "Clara, the building needs work. I know what it needs. I also know what happens when rich men pay for things. Their names grow larger than the door." That landed. Victor looked at the damaged roof, then at the people watching. He could have been offended. Instead, he deserved it. "Then we put the house in a trust," he said. "Community board. You, Thomas, Mrs. Alvarez, the headmistress, a town representative, and one seat for my family if you allow it. Harrington money pays for repairs but buys no naming rights, no control, no ownership. The deed stays with the trust. The mission stays yours." Clara studied him. "Why?" "Because my wife asked me to restore this place, and I failed. Because you restored what mattered before I restored a single wall. Because my children breathe better here. Because I am tired of turning love into property." No one spoke. Snow melted on Victor's shoulders. Emma moved to his side and slipped her hand into his. Noah took the other. Clara looked at the children, then at the burned roof, then at the volunteers who had given what little they had. Finally, she said, "The board decides together." Victor nodded. Together. The repairs began the following week. This time professionals came, but so did volunteers. The construction crew wore hard hats and followed codes. Thomas supervised with the fierce suspicion of a man who trusted his own hammer more than any contractor's. Clara insisted the blackened beams in the dining room remain visible under treatment, because people should know beauty had not erased the fire. Emma and Eli painted new signs for the safety zones. Noah collected bent nails in a jar and called them dragon teeth. Victor paid invoices without ceremony. He did not allow press on site. When reporters called, he referred them to the community board. When the board asked whether he wanted a donor plaque, he said no. Clara watched him carefully during that meeting. Afterward, she found him outside, standing under the old Sparrow sign. "You could have taken credit," she said. "I have taken enough things that were not mine." She leaned beside the porch post. "That is an honest answer. I am trying to have more of those." For the first time since the firing, Clara smiled at him without sadness. "Keep trying," she said. "It suits you better than commanding." Christmas approached. The town decided to reopen the Sparrow House on Christmas Eve with a lantern supper. Not a gala, Victor insisted when one board member suggested formal invitations. No tickets, no speeches longer than 3 minutes. Clara added. No one turned away. Thomas added, and no glitter near the new floor. The motion passed unanimously. In the days before the reopening, Emma changed. She still missed Isabel fiercely, but the missing no longer sealed her mouth. She asked questions about her mother constantly. What was her favorite song? Did she ever get angry? Did she like snow? Did she know Clara? Victor answered what he could and admitted what he could not. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried, sometimes both happened at the same time, which Noah found confusing until Clara told him hearts were allowed to spill more than one feeling at once. Noah's stomach pains did not vanish like a miracle. They faded like a tide. Some nights he still curled up and asked if people could die in the rain. Victor no longer called the question irrational. He sat with him, said Isabel's name, and waited. The pain usually passed. When it did not, they breathed together until morning. Victor learned that presence could be exhausting and still be love. On Christmas Eve, the Sparrow House glowed against the snow like a lantern itself. The repaired roof held a clean white line. The porch was wrapped in pine branches. Inside, the blackened beams shone dark and strong above tables crowded with soup, bread, roasted vegetables, donated pies, and steaming mugs. Paper lanterns hung everywhere, each marked with a name, a wish, a memory, or a word someone needed to believe. People came from every part of town. Wealthy families arrived without private drivers for once. Factory workers came in boots. Teachers came with students. Elderly widows came arm in arm. Children ran between rooms carrying candles and glass jars. No one knew exactly where to stand at first, because the place did not divide people by status. Clara solved that by handing out bowls. Hunger made everyone equal faster than speeches. Victor arrived with Emma and Noah. He wore a simple dark sweater instead of a suit. This caused Thomas to say he looked almost human, which made Noah laugh so hard that Victor had to laugh too. Clara stood near the kitchen, directing volunteers, her hair escaping its pins, her face flushed from stove heat. When she saw the children, her expression softened. When she saw Victor carrying a tray of bread without being asked, it softened more. At 7 o'clock, Clara rang a small brass bell that had survived the fire. The room quieted. She stood near the hearth, visibly uncomfortable with attention. "This house," she said, "was once an inn where travelers found rest. Then it burned." Some people thought that meant its story was over. But people are not finished because they are burned. Houses are not finished because they are broken. Families are not finished because someone they love is gone. Victor looked down. Emma pressed against his side. Clara continued. "This place was rebuilt by hands that had known loss. Every board, every bowl, every lantern carries someone's kindness. Tonight, we open the doors not because pain has ended, but because no one should have to carry it outside in the cold." She turned toward Victor, surprising him. "There is someone whose dream lived here before any of us were brave enough to follow it." Isabel Harrington believed the Sparrow Inn should be a place for lonely people to be welcomed. Her family kept that dream alive. Her children brought her light back into these rooms. So tonight, we remember Isabel, and we remember everyone whose name is painted above us. Emma stepped forward, holding the white lantern with the sparrow. Her hands shook. Victor wanted to help, but Clara met his eyes and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Let her." Emma climbed onto a chair. The room held its breath. "My mama's name was Isabel," Emma said. Her voice was small, but it did not break. "My daddy was scared to say her name because it hurt. I was scared too. Miss Clara said names are candles. So tonight we are lighting my mama's candle. And if you have someone you miss, you can say their name here, and nobody will tell you to stop." The room blurred in front of Victor. Around him, people began to cry quietly. Mrs. Alvarez whispered, "Daniel." Thomas said, "Ruth." The veteran said, "Michael." A teacher said, "Anna." Name after name moved through the Sparrow House like bells under snow. Grief did not become smaller, but it became shared, and shared grief no longer had to pretend to be silence. Noah tugged Victor's sleeve. "Say it, Daddy." Victor looked at the lantern, at Emma, at Clara, at the room full of people brave enough to hurt aloud. "Isabel," he said, his voice cracked. "Isabel." Emma lit the lantern from the hearth candle. Clara helped her hang it in the center of the room. When the light glowed through the paper, illuminating the painted sparrow, the entire house seemed to bow around it. Victor covered his mouth with one hand. He had attended banquets in marble halls, openings with fireworks, ceremonies where ministers praised him into microphones. Nothing had ever felt as holy as that uneven paper lantern swinging beneath a blackened beam. After the names, supper began again, but softly. People who had arrived as strangers reached for one another's hands. Children showed adults where to paint lanterns. Eli taught Noah how to tie the loops. Emma sat beside a girl from school who had lost her grandmother and did not know what to do with the sadness. Emma said, "You can paint it purple if words are too hard." Victor heard her and almost broke again, but this time the breaking felt like a seed opening. Later, Clara found him on the porch. Snow fell beyond the lantern light. Inside, the supper continued, warm and loud. Victor leaned on the railing that Thomas had repaired and watched his children through the window. Emma was laughing. Noah was explaining dragon teeth nails to 3 younger boys. Eli wore his green scarf and looked less solemn than he had months before. "You did this," Victor said. Clara stood beside him. "No, we did. I gave you ashes. You gave me a door," she said. Not kindly, not wisely, but it opened. He smiled faintly. "That is a generous way to describe cruelty. It is an honest way to describe redemption." She looked at him. Cruelty was the beginning, not the ending. Do not confuse the two, unless you plan to stop here. I do not. Good. They stood in quiet. Victor wanted to say many things, too many. But he had learned that not every feeling required immediate speech. The snow made the town softer. The lanterns made the windows gold. Somewhere inside, someone began the sparrow lullaby from the storm night, and other voices joined. "Clara," Victor said after a while, "when I fired you, Emma spoke because she was trying to protect you. I thought that meant I was losing my daughter to someone else. Clara listened. Now I understand she was trying to show me the way back. Children do that, Clara said, even when adults are too proud to follow. He nodded. Thank you for not letting my pride be the last word. I did not have that power. You had more than you think. She shook her head. I had a table, some soup, and the memory of what saved my own son. Power is what you had. Presence is what I could give. Victor looked through the window at Emma lifting Noah onto a chair to hang a lantern. Presence, he said, tasting the word as if it were both simple and immense. Weeks passed after Christmas, and the Sparrow House did not become famous in the way the world usually understood fame. There were articles, yes, and donations, and visitors who came because they had seen photographs of the lanterns online. But Clara protected the place from becoming a spectacle. No cameras in the listening room, no interviews with grieving children, no naming tables after donors. If people wanted to help, they could wash dishes, fund repairs anonymously, bring food, or sit with someone who did not want to be alone. The rules were strange to wealthy people and comforting to everyone else. Victor followed them. He still made mistakes. Once he ordered new commercial ovens without asking the kitchen volunteers and discovered they had nowhere to fit. Clara made him return them and attend a board discussion about practical needs. Another time he tried to shorten a meeting by deciding 3 things at once. Mrs. Alvarez tapped his hand with a wooden spoon and said, "We are not one of your hotels, dear. Sit down." To his own surprise, he sat. At home, Harrington House changed too. The dining table no longer swallowed the children. Victor moved meals to the kitchen twice a week, then more often, until the formal dining room became a place for holidays instead of loneliness. Emma taped drawings to the refrigerator. Noah left toy cars on the stairs. Victor tripped over one and almost shouted, then remembered laughter in the laundry room and set the car carefully on the banister. Ora still matter, but it no longer mattered more than life. They baked Isabel's cookies again. The first batch burned. Smoke filled the kitchen, and Victor panicked for half a second before Emma opened a window and Noah declared them dragon cookies. Clara, invited for supper with Eli and her sister, tasted one and said bravely that dragons would enjoy them. Everyone laughed. Victor looked at the flower on Emma's hair, the chocolate on Noah's sleeve, the smile Clara tried to hide, and understood that the scene he had once punished had been exactly what his house needed. One night, he drove Clara home after a late board meeting. Her sister's apartment was modest, lit by one lamp in the window. Eli slept in the back seat under his green scarf. Victor parked but did not immediately unlock the doors. Clara looked at him. "Is something wrong?" "No. I was thinking about the day you left. I never asked where you were supposed to go." She looked out the windshield. "My sister's couch. Then maybe another job, maybe another city. And yet you took the inn." "I took it because when you called it worthless, I thought of all the people who get called that because they are damaged." She paused. "Also, I was angry." Victor glanced at her, surprised. "You did not seem angry." Poor women often learn to fold anger small enough to carry safely. The sentence stayed with him. "I am sorry," he said. "You said that already. I suspect I will need to say it more than once." Clara looked at him then, and there was no bitterness in her face, only memory. "Yes," she said. "Some apologies are not doors. They are roads." Spring came. The river thawed. Wildflowers returned along the fence road. The Sparrow House garden, once buried under weeds and ash, became a place where children planted herbs in crooked rows. Noah took special responsibility for rosemary because Isabel had loved it. Emma painted small signs for each plant, misspelling lavender 3 different ways. Victor did not correct her until she asked. On the anniversary of Isabel's death, Victor expected the old darkness to swallow the house. In previous years he had spent the day in the office, pretending numbers could drown memory. This year, Emma and Noah asked to go to the Sparrow House. They carried flowers, recipe cards, and the framed photograph of Isabel under the old sign. Clara had not planned an event, only opened the rooms quietly for anyone who needed them. Victor stood before Isabel's lantern with his children. For a long time none of them spoke. Then Noah said, "I wish she could see it." "Maybe she can," Emma said. Victor did not know what he believed about such things. For once, he did not turn uncertainty into dismissal. "Maybe love sees more than we think," he said. Emma leaned into him. Noah took his hand. Around them, other people moved softly through the room, lighting candles, writing names, carrying bowls. Life and grief shared the same air. Victor realized that healing had not brought him back to who he was before Isabel died. It had made him someone else, someone scarred and more human. That afternoon, The town gathered outside for the garden dedication. Not a ceremony of wealth, but of gratitude. Thomas unveiled a bench made from salvaged wood from the original inn. Mrs. Alvarez had sewn cushions from donated fabric. Eli had carved a tiny sparrow under the seat. On the back of the bench were words from Isabel's letter, chosen by the board. Love is not only protection. Sometimes love is sitting beside the hurt and staying. When Victor saw the words, he had to turn away. Clara noticed but did not follow. She had learned when to give comfort and when to give space. Emma followed him instead. She found him by the river, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand. "Daddy," she said, "are you sad?" "Yes. Bad sad or good sad?" He considered. "Both." She nodded with the wisdom children earn too young. "Clara says both can sit on the same bench." Victor laughed. "Clara says many things. She is usually right." "Yes," he admitted, annoyingly often. Emma smiled, then grew serious. "Are we still rich?" The question startled him. "Yes, but not empty." Victor looked at his daughter. "No," he said, voice thick. "Not empty." By summer, the Sparrow House had become woven into the town's daily rhythm. People stopped by before work for coffee if they had no one at home. Children came after school to read or paint. The upstairs rooms, restored slowly and safely, became temporary lodging for families traveling for hospital visits, women rebuilding their lives, and elderly people waiting for housing repairs. Clara refused to let the place become charity that looked down. Everyone who stayed was invited to give something if they could. A story, a chore, a song, a recipe, a lesson, a hand in the garden. Dignity, she told the volunteers, grows better when it is watered from both sides. Victor watched her lead with a strength he had once mistaken for softness. She could comfort a crying child, then negotiate lumber prices with a contractor until the man surrendered. She could listen for an hour to someone repeating the same sorrow, then tell a donor with perfect politeness that generosity did not purchase authority. She was not a saint. She grew tired. She snapped at Thomas once about misplaced tools and apologized 15 minutes later. She forgot to eat on busy days until Eli brought her soup with a stern expression copied from her own face. Her humanity made the place safer, not less. One afternoon, a limousine stopped outside while Clara was repairing a torn curtain. A woman in pearls stepped out with two photographers and announced that her foundation wanted to present a large check. Clara welcomed the help and refused the cameras inside. The woman blinked as if no one had refused her anything in years. Victor, washing mugs nearby, nearly laughed into the sink. When the woman looked to him for support, he dried his hands and said, "House rules." Later Clara found him still smiling. "You enjoyed that too much," she said. "A little. Be careful. Humility can become pride if you admire yourself for it." He groaned. "Must every lesson come with homework?" Yes. Their friendship became one of the quiet surprises of that year. It was not the kind of friendship newspapers tried to invent with photographs and whispers. It was built from shared tasks, hard conversations, and the mutual knowledge of grief. Victor learned about Clara's husband, Daniel, who had sung off key while fixing radios, who had died because a warehouse owner ignored safety warnings. Clara learned about Victor's guilt, not only for Isabel's accident, which he could not have prevented, but for the years before it, when he had mistaken providing for cherishing. They did not solve each other. They witnessed. One evening, as they closed the Sparrow House after a long supper, Victor found Noah asleep at the long table, cheek on a folded napkin. Emma and Eli were sweeping around him. Clara covered Noah with a blanket. The sight pierced Victor with tenderness. There had been a time when he would have carried the boy to the car immediately, embarrassed by the mess, worried about routine. Now he let him sleep until the room was ready. Rest, he had learned, was not laziness. It was trust made visible. The anniversary of Clara's firing arrived without anyone planning to remember it. Victor remembered anyway. He came to the Sparrow House early with a folder in his hand and found Clara in the garden picking rosemary. She saw the folder and raised an eyebrow. "If that is more paperwork, I am hiding in the pantry." "It is paperwork," he said, "but not urgent. That is what powerful people say before ruining breakfast." He smiled. "Fair." He handed her the folder. Inside were final documents establishing the Sparrow House Trust permanently, protecting it from sale, inheritance disputes, or corporate acquisition. The deed, once given in cruelty, now belonged to a mission no single person could own. Clara read quietly. Her fingers paused on the clause naming her founding director with a salary set by the board, benefits, and housing options if she chose to live on site. Victor said, "The board approved it, unanimously." You can refuse, of course. Clara's eyes shone. For months she had lived between her sister's couch, the inn's office, and exhaustion. Accepting stability frightened her because life had taught her that gifts often carried hooks. She looked through the pages again, searching for them. No hidden control, Victor said. No Harrington ownership. No name change. No conditions except accountability to the board. Why are you doing this today? Because 1 year ago I tried to reduce you to someone I could dismiss. Today I wanted the papers to say what should have been true then. Your work has value. Your time has value. Your life is not a favor you owe everyone else. Clara pressed the folder to her chest. For a moment she could not speak. Then she said, Daniel used to tell me I was terrible at receiving kindness. Daniel was right. She laughed through tears. Do not get used to saying that about my husband. Never. That night, the Sparrow House held a small supper to mark 1 year since the first bowl of soup in the burned dining room. Clara had wanted no speeches. Naturally, everyone gave speeches. Thomas spoke about hammers. Mrs. Alvarez spoke about mornings that no longer felt unbearable. Eli, red-faced and brave, said the house had helped him remember his father's songs without feeling like the songs would break him. Emma said the listening room was where her voice found a door. Noah said the soup was good and the roof no longer dripped into it, which he considered progress. Then Victor stood. The room quieted, perhaps because people still expected rich men to speak longer than necessary. He held no notes. A year ago, he said, I gave Clara Bell this building because I believed it was ruined. I believed that about the inn because I believed it about myself. I thought if something was burned, broken, or grieving, the best thing to do was lock it away and build something colder in its place. He looked at Clara, then at his children. I was wrong. Clara did not save this house by pretending the fire never happened. She saved it by letting the scars remain and inviting people to sit beneath them. She did not save my family by replacing anyone. She helped us say the name we were afraid to say. She taught my children that pain does not make them inconvenient. She taught me that love is not control. It is presence. His voice faltered. Emma reached for his hand. He held it. So tonight, I want to say publicly what I should have said privately long ago. Clara, I am sorry. Thank you for staying long enough to build what my pride almost destroyed. The room was silent. Clara's eyes filled, but she gave him the same gift she had given many others. She let the truth stand without rushing to soften it. Then she said, apology accepted. Keep showing up. Laughter and tears moved through the room together. Victor nodded. I will. After supper, they carried lanterns outside. The town had gathered beyond the porch. More people than anyone expected. Some had eaten at the house. Some had donated. Some had only heard of it and come because the night was clear. Each person held a small lantern with a name or word painted on it. The river reflected the lights in trembling lines. Clara rang the brass bell. No speech this time. One by one, people placed their lanterns along the stone path Isabel had built years before. Daniel, Ruth, Michael, Anna, courage, home, forgiveness, stay. The path glowed from the porch to the garden gate, a river of paper light over ground that had once been ash. Victor placed Isabel's lantern at the center. Emma placed one that said voice. Noah placed one that said belly brave, which made everyone smile. Eli placed one that said dad's song. Clara placed one with a single word, enough. Victor saw it and understood. Enough did not mean the work was finished or grief had ended. It meant the people standing there did not have to earn their right to be held. Their broken offerings were enough. Their trembling voices were enough. Their presence was enough. The town cried that night, not because the story was sad, though parts of it were. They cried because the building before them proved something they had forgotten. A place could burn and still become shelter. A man could fail and still learn to kneel. A child could go silent and still find her voice. A poor woman could be dismissed by a billionaire and still build something his money alone could never create. Late that evening, after the last guest had gone, Victor found Clara in the dining room extinguishing candles. The blackened beams held the lantern glow like memory. Emma and Noah slept on cushions in the listening room beside Eli, exhausted from joy. Victor helped Clara gather mugs. Do you ever wonder, he asked, what would have happened if I had not fired you? Clara considered. Maybe the house would have stayed clean and your children would have stayed quiet. That is a terrible answer. It is an honest one. He nodded. I hate that you are right. You are improving. You hate it more politely now. He laughed, and the sound did not startle him anymore. They washed the last mugs in companionable silence. Outside, the lantern path flickered in the cold. Inside, the room smelled of soup, wax, rosemary, and wood smoke from a safe fire in the rebuilt hearth. When Victor carried Noah to the car, The boy woke briefly. "Daddy," he murmured, "is Sparrow House ours?" Victor looked back at the porch, where Clara stood under the sign speaking with Thomas. "No," he said softly, "and yes." Noah frowned sleepily. "That does not make sense. The best things rarely do at first." Emma, half asleep against his shoulder, whispered, "It belongs to everyone who needs it." Victor kissed her hair. "Exactly." At home, Harrington House no longer felt like a museum. The kitchen still held traces of flour from the morning. A rosemary plant leaned dramatically by the window. Isabel's photograph stood on the counter, not hidden in an office. Beside it was a small paper lantern Emma had painted with 4 figures standing under a crooked roof: her mother, her father, her brother, and Clara. Eli had added a tiny green scarf to one corner. Noah had drawn dragon teeth along the bottom. Victor placed his keys beside the photograph and listened. The house made ordinary sounds now: pipes settling, children breathing, rain beginning softly against the windows. Once, rain had meant the night he lost everything. Now it also meant soup at the Sparrow House, Clara's lullaby, lanterns trembling but not going out. Memory had not changed. He had. He went to the children's rooms and sat between their beds until both were fully asleep. He did not check his phone. He did not rehearse tomorrow's meetings. He did not plan how to improve grief. He simply stayed. In the quiet, he said Isabel's name once, not as an apology, not as a wound, but as a candle. Downstairs, the paper lantern near her photograph moved slightly in the warm air from the vent. Its small light would not have impressed anyone who measured value in towers or accounts. But to Victor, it was brighter than every hotel sign he had ever built. There are stories people tell about wealth, about power, about the grand gestures that change lives. But sometimes a life changes because a woman with tired hands kneels beside a crying child and refuses to hurry the tears. Sometimes a family is saved not by a miracle, but by soup, lanterns, honest names, and someone brave enough to stay in a room filled with pain. Sometimes a burned inn becomes the heart of a town because one person sees shelter where another sees ashes. Victor Harrington had once believed he gave Clara Bell nothing. In the end, the nothing he threw away became the place where his children healed, where his wife's dream breathed again, where strangers found warmth, and where he finally learned the one lesson no fortune had been able to buy. Love is not proven by what we control. It is proven by where we remain when control is gone. And on the nights when the Sparrow House windows glowed over the river, everyone in town knew that some lights are born not because the darkness is weak, but because someone chooses to keep lighting them anyway. Years later, when people asked Victor when the real rebuilding began, he never mentioned the contract, the roof, or the night the town filled the yard with lanterns. He spoke about a smaller moment. He spoke about the morning after Christmas, when he arrived early and found Clara sweeping the porch alone. Snow covered the riverbank, the kitchen windows were fogged, and inside the listening room a child had left one unfinished lantern on the table. Victor picked it up and saw only 3 crooked words painted across the paper: "Please stay here." Clara looked at the lantern and said every person who entered the house was really asking the same thing, even when they arrived angry, proud, hungry, silent, or ashamed. Victor carried those words for the rest of his life. He placed them in boardrooms, not on walls, but inside decisions. He placed them at home whenever Emma grew quiet or Noah's fears returned. He placed them in himself whenever old grief tried to make him cold again. "Please, stay here." It was not a command, it was a prayer. And because Clara had answered that prayer with work, patience, soup, and light, an entire town learned to answer it too. That was why the house endured, not as a monument to sorrow, but as proof that ordinary kindness, repeated on difficult days, can become stronger than shame, louder than fear, and warmer than any fire grief once tried to steal. And everyone who entered felt that warmth waiting patiently for them.